The diary was never meant to be read by anyone else, yet the moment its pages were opened, fear itself began to speak, not loudly, but with the quiet certainty of something remembered too clearly to be denied. He wrote by candlelight in a half-collapsed farmhouse on the edge of Lorraine, the flame trembling each time artillery thudded somewhere beyond the hills. His hands shook as he held the pencil, not from cold alone, though winter pressed through broken walls, but from the echo of what he had seen only hours earlier. Mud still clung to his boots, thick and heavy, as if the ground itself refused to let him go. He noted the time carefully, because time mattered now more than ever. Every minute survived feeling like something stolen. Outside, fog drifted low across the fields, turning trees into dark silhouettes that looked like crouching men waiting to spring. He had been trained to fear shells, bombs, and aircraft, to measure danger in noise and destruction. But what unnerved him most about the Americans he had encountered was how little sound they made before the killing began. Their tanks emerged from the fog, not roaring forward in reckless charges, but moving slowly, deliberately, engines humming like restrained animals. They advanced as if they knew the ground already belonged to them. Mines exploded beneath their tracks, shaking the earth, yet the columns did not stop. One tank lost a tread and burned, another simply rolled past it, guns already swinging toward unseen targets. To the diarist, it felt less like a battle, and more like being hunted by something patient and certain of the outcome. He wrote that the men inside those machines fought differently. They did not shout. They did not panic when fire came back at them. They returned it calmly, methodically, as if fear had been stripped from them and replaced with something harder. The infantry followed close behind, dark figures moving through smoke, rifles up, steps steady. He had seen veterans before, men hardened by years of war, but this was something else. These soldiers did not look surprised by death. They looked prepared for it. When one fell, another filled the space without hesitation. It unsettled him more deeply than fanaticism ever had. Fanatics could be broken, this could not. Someone near him whispered a name, not loudly, not as a warning, but as a statement of fact. Schwarze Teufel, Black Devils. The words moved down the trench like a chill, changing the way men breathed, the way fingers tightened around triggers. He had heard rumors of them before, dismissed them as exaggerations, stories soldiers told to give shape to their fear. Now he knew better. Fear did not create these stories. These stories created fear. He admitted in his diary what he could never say to an officer. When these Americans appeared, something inside men collapsed. Orders were obeyed slower. Eyes searched for escape routes instead of targets. Courage became something remembered rather than felt. He described how the fog lifted just enough for him to see one of their soldiers clearly. The man moved forward through shell holes and wreckage, as if the chaos around him did not exist. His uniform was darkened with mud and smoke, his face unreadable, his focus fixed straight ahead. Bullets snapped past him, cutting the air, yet he did not flinch. When he fired, it was controlled, purposeful. The diarist realized with a sickening certainty that this man believed he would survive, not because he was lucky, but because he was determined to. That belief, that quiet confidence, terrified him more than any weapon. As the engagement ended and darkness returned, the Germans pulled back, leaving equipment and wounded behind in their haste. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood why. The Black Devils were still out there, and staying meant dying. In the farmhouse, as he wrote, the diarist tried to make sense of his fear by committing it to paper. He analyzed movements, formation, tactics, anything to convince himself this was still a war governed by rules. Yet each sentence betrayed him. Again and again he returned to the same idea. These Americans advanced not as conquerors, but as men who had already accepted the cost of victory. That acceptance made them unstoppable. He paused often, listening for sounds beyond the walls, half expecting engines to growl out of the fog once more. Every creak of the building made his heart race. He wrote that he had fought Russians in the east and British in the west, and none had unsettled him like this. The Russians attacked with fury, the British with caution, but these Americans fought with something colder. They adapted quickly, learned fast, and pressed every advantage without mercy. He wondered what made them this way. Training, perhaps, or something deeper. He did not know. But he suspected it had nothing to do with hatred and everything to do with resolve. As the candle burned lower, wax pooling on the table, he added a final thought for the night. If command continued to underestimate these men, more pages like this would be written, and more would end abruptly. He tucked the diary away, not knowing if he would survive to write again. Outside, the fog closed in once more, swallowing the fields, and somewhere within it, the black devils waited, patient as ever. Morning came without relief, only a thin grey light that revealed how little of the night's fear had been imagination. The diarist resumed writing with aching fingers, the pencil shorter now, the paper smudged with dirt and sweat. He noted how silence after battle carried its own weight, heavier than shellfire, because it gave the mind space to replay every sound and movement. Men spoke in low voices, avoiding eye contact, each of them privately measuring how close they had come to dying. What haunted him most was not what the Black Devils had done, but how easily they had done it. There had been no dramatic charge, no wild shouting, only steady pressure until resistance folded inward on itself. He wrote that prisoners taken during the retreat confirmed everything he feared. They spoke of the same unit again and again, Americans whose presence alone changed the shape of the battlefield. One captured driver said he had watched a Sherman tank continue advancing even after taking hits that should have disabled it, its gun firing with relentless rhythm until German positions went silent. Another prisoner described infantrymen who advanced behind rolling barrages, closing distances others would never attempt, as if they trusted their own momentum more than cover. These accounts were told without embellishment, which made them worse. There was no boasting, only resignation. The diarist understood then that legend did not require exaggeration to grow. Truth was enough. As he wrote, he reflected on how fear spread faster than orders. A single whispered story could undo weeks of discipline. Men began scanning tree lines and hedgerows more than maps, convinced the Black Devils were always closer than they appeared. Every engine noise became a warning. Every shadow held a threat. He observed how confidence drained from even experienced officers, replaced by caution that bordered on paralysis. In war, hesitation could be fatal, and he saw it claimless before a shot was fired. The Americans, by contrast, seemed to thrive on momentum. They exploited every pause, every moment of uncertainty, pressing forward before defenders could recover. The diarist tried to analyze why these soldiers inspired such dread. He considered equipment first. American tanks were not invincible, but they were reliable. Their radios worked. Their logistics flowed like blood through veins. Ammunition arrived when needed. Fuel followed them relentlessly. Yet equipment alone did not explain the effect. He had faced superior machines before and survived. What unsettled him was the men operating them. They moved with coordination that suggested trust, not just in orders but in each other. When one element advanced, others supported without delay. There was no confusion, no argument, no visible doubt. It was as if they shared an unspoken understanding of purpose. He recorded a story told by a wounded sergeant who claimed to have watched one of the Black Devils' tanks burn fiercely after a direct hit. Flames poured from the turret, Smoke billowed into the sky, yet the gun continued firing until the last possible moment. The crew did not abandon their post. They fought until fire consumed the machine entirely. Whether the story was true mattered less than the belief it inspired. Men who heard it spoke in hushed tones, imagining opponents who valued mission over survival. Against such enemies, traditional intimidation failed. You could not scare someone who had already accepted death. The diarist admitted something difficult in his writing. Part of his fear was admiration twisted into dread. He respected their discipline, their refusal to yield, even as it threatened his life. He wondered what kind of society produced such soldiers, what promises or expectations shaped them. Some claimed they fought harder because surrender was not always safe for them, that mercy could not be relied upon. Others believed they fought to prove something, to silence those who doubted their worth. The diarist did not know the truth, but he recognized the power of belief. Belief shaped behavior, and behavior shaped outcomes. Throughout the day, reports filtered in of further losses, positions abandoned, counterattacks repelled. Each message carried the same undertone: resistance was eroding. He wrote that fear now killed faster than bullets, hollowing out units from within. Men fired blindly, wasting ammunition. Others froze, unable to move. Against the Black Devils, chaos favored the attacker. They exploited panic ruthlessly, pushing through gaps before defenders could regroup. The diarist felt as though he were watching an inevitable process unfold, like water wearing away stone. As evening approached, he continued writing, compelled by the need to leave a record. If he did not survive, perhaps these pages would explain what had happened here better than official reports ever could. He wrote that hatred had once been his armor, but now it felt thin and brittle. The Americans were not monsters. They were soldiers who did their job with frightening efficiency. That truth stripped away comforting illusion. It meant defeat was not the result of fate or betrayal, but of facing an enemy who had mastered the art of modern war. He ended the day's entry with a sense of foreboding. The forest ahead was too quiet again, the same silence that had preceded the last encounter. He suspected the Black Devils were near, advancing as patiently as ever. Folding the diary carefully, he felt the weight of its pages, heavy with fear, respect, and a growing certainty that this war was slipping beyond his grasp. Night returned like an old enemy, familiar and relentless, wrapping the land in shadows that seemed deeper now, heavier with meaning. The diarist began writing again with a sense of urgency that pressed against every word, as if time itself were narrowing. He described how the air felt charged, not with noise, but with expectation, the kind that made the skin prickle and the mind race ahead of the body. Men moved quietly, speaking only when necessary, each step measured, each breath shallow. The forest ahead loomed like a wall, dark and unreadable, swallowing moonlight and sound alike. He wrote that this silence was never empty. It was full of intent. Orders arrived late and incomplete, as they often did now. Hold, delay, withdraw, if necessary. Vague words for an exacting reality. The diarist noted how uncertainty at the top filtered downward, magnifying fear at every level. Soldiers no longer asked when relief would come, they asked whether it would come at all. He recorded the way eyes kept drifting toward the tree line, toward the road, toward any place the Black Devils might emerge. Every snapped twig drew weapons up. Every distant rumble froze conversations mid-sentence. The enemy no longer needed to be seen to be present. Their reputation had already arrived. He wrote about a brief encounter just before midnight, a skirmish so fast it barely felt real. Shots rang out, sharp and sudden, then silence again. When it ended, several men lay dead. and no one could say for certain how many Americans had been there. That uncertainty gnawed at him. Against other enemies, numbers mattered. Against the Black Devils, it seemed irrelevant. A handful of them could pin down an entire unit, maneuvering with confidence, striking where least expected, then vanishing before retaliation could be organized. It felt less like fighting soldiers and more like contending with a force of nature that obeyed its own logic. As he continued writing, he reflected on how quickly hope eroded when fear became constant. At the start of the war, fear had been sharp but fleeting, something that passed once action began. Now it lingered, settled into bones and thoughts, shaping decisions before conscious reasoning could intervene. He admitted to himself that he no longer believed in victory, only in survival, and even that felt uncertain. The Black Devils represented more than a tactical threat. They symbolized an enemy that could not be intimidated, bargained with, or exhausted through delay. They kept coming. He described the final movement of the night, the order to pull back once more, abandoning another position without a full fight. It was not cowardice, he insisted to the page, but calculation. Yet even as he wrote it, he knew the distinction mattered little. Retreat after retreat hollowed out any remaining confidence. He noted abandoned weapons along the road, discarded packs, signs of men shedding weight in a desperate attempt to move faster, discipline frayed at the edges. The Americans, he suspected, would exploit this by dawn. They always did. Somewhere during that withdrawal, he found a moment to write what felt like a confession. He no longer hated the Black Devils. Hatred required distance, caricature, simplification. What he felt now was something closer to awe mixed with dread. They had mastered the balance between aggression and control, between courage and calculation. They did not waste effort. They did not linger. They advanced with the quiet certainty of men who trusted their training and each other completely. Facing them forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. Bravery alone was not enough to win wars. Organization, adaptability, and belief mattered more. The diary's final pages grew shorter, sentences tighter, as if words themselves were running out. He wrote of dawn approaching, a pale line on the horizon that brought no comfort. With light would come movement, and with movement would come them. He tucked the diary beneath his coat once more, intending to add more later, always later. The last thing he wrote was not about tactics or fear, but about legacy. He wondered who would read these pages, if anyone ever would, and whether they would understand that acknowledging an enemy's strength was not betrayal but honesty. The diary ended there. It was found days later beside an abandoned road. Mud spattered, edges worn, its owner gone. No body was identified with certainty. No report explained his fate. The war moved on, indifferent to one man's thoughts. Yet the diary endured, a quiet testament to what numbers and communiques could never fully capture. It revealed that the Black Devils were feared not because they were mythical, but because they were real. Disciplined men who refused to yield to the expectations placed upon them. In the end, the greatest tribute to their impact was written not by allies celebrating victory, but by an enemy who faced them and survived long enough to tell the truth. The pages did not truly end with the last sentence he wrote. What followed was the silent testimony of absence, the weight of what was no longer there. Soldiers who later passed that road remembered the abandoned diary because it felt wrong, like a voice cut off mid-breath. Some said the owner must have been taken prisoner. Others believed he had fallen during another sudden engagement, one more name lost in a ledger already too full. No one could say for certain, and uncertainty itself became part of the story, mirroring the way the Black Devils moved through the war, appearing, striking, disappearing, leaving questions behind them. Long after the guns fell silent, after borders shifted and uniforms changed, the diary resurfaced again, passed from hand to hand, translated, studied. Those who read it expected bitterness, hatred, or excuses. Instead, they found something far more unsettling: clarity. The writer did not exaggerate. He did not plead. He observed. His words carried the exhaustion of a man who had looked directly at defeat and chosen honesty over comfort. In doing so, he stripped war of its slogans and left only its essence: fear confronted by resolve. What lingered most for later readers was how the black devils lived in his mind even when they were not physically present. They shaped his decisions, his sleep, his understanding of the battlefield. They became a force that existed beyond individual men or machines, an idea forged by discipline and unity. That idea traveled faster than any tank. It crossed forests, rivers, and command lines, eroding confidence before the first shot was fired. Historians would later describe this as psychological warfare, but the diarist had felt it in simpler terms: dread that arrived before death and stayed long after. The irony, revealed only in hindsight, was that the fear he recorded became proof of their humanity. Devils did not tire, doubt, or learn. Men did. And these men had learned how to fight together in a way that reshaped modern war. They were feared because they adapted, because they trusted systems and comrades, because they believed the future could be forced forward through persistence. In recognizing that, the diarist unknowingly preserved their legacy more powerfully than any victory speech. So the story does not end with his disappearance, but with what he left behind. A private diary became a public mirror, reflecting how courage can terrify those who stand against it, and how the truest measure of strength is often written by the trembling hand of an enemy. The Black Devils marched on through history, not just in medals and records, but in the quiet admission of fear etched into fading paper. Proof that even in war, respect can survive where hatred fails.